are you?
I am good. How are you?
Well, I'm doing well.
I'm so glad that worked. I get anxious about these technological things.
I'm a true social worker. And I can social work in that situation, but technology.
I know. It's so good to see you.
Challenge.
It's been a few months since I've seen you. It's so good to see you.
Likewise, it's good to be seen. It's good to be seen. I appreciate it so much. I've been looking forward to chatting.
Me too. So, to give you your introduction,
Okay.
Alford is the founder of Vitality Wellness Solutions. You are a licensed clinical social worker. You are certified in perinatal mental health. You are also certified in sexual educator. In December 2021, you participated in the first ever federal Maternal Day of Action with the Office of Vice President Kamala Harris's
Okay.
group. And as a Black woman clinician and sexologist, Valon often unpacks the nuance of intersectionality on mental, sexual, and maternal experiences of women of color. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much.
So, all right. So I have a couple of questions that I was supposed to send to you, and then time got away, but here we are.
We're going to roll with it. We're going to
all right. So the first thing is I love that you talk about the intersectionality on mental, sexual, and maternal health, which is something that we are constantly driving the mental and the maternal health to break the stigma within the Black community. But why do you think that the sex piece is often left out of the conversation? And why do you also think it's so important to discuss?
Oh, okay. This is a great question. Okay, come on now. You might be a journalist too. But I think that's a great question. And I think the sex part is left out because when other people can't control it, or they don't feel like they can control us, and it gets moved, it's not as important. And so as long as Black women's sexual health was, fueling the economy, it was prioritized, to some degree, or I should say it was maybe not prioritized, but it was, it was fueling the economy. And so,
Right.
Certain aspects of our sexuality that, that was commodified. And so after that, I just feel like it's not a part of a conversation because it's hard for Black women to freely be sexual beings. Whether you're asexual, whether you are, cisgender or heterosexual or not, it's just owning our stories. I remember a few years ago, I did a workshop with the local NESW chapter, and the title was Sexual Health for Black Women Beyond Pregnancy, STIs, and Pleasing Men. Because when I think about my own sexual experiences, I feel like a lot of what I learned formally and even just in our own circles has always sort of been in that context, like whether it's about conception or contraception or how to please your man, and then sometimes in the smaller circles you might have conversations about STIs and things like that. But just for the sake of pleasure, I don't remember a lot of those conversations. I don't remember a lot of those conversations. And my parents had me in high school. My mom was a teen mom. And so I was at her high school graduation. And they did the thing because we all, we're doing really good. But my conversation, our conversation was don't bring no babies in here.
Right. Right.
And so when I reflect on my own womanhood, there's so much that I learned about my own sexuality, my sexual health, myself as a sexual being. I always say through default, like live and learn, or, in hindsight, just kind of processing a situationship or, being a first generation college student and just all sorts of things. A lot of it wasn't, between what I learned in school, and we know that a lot of, states there is not a requirement that you have comprehensive, medically accurate sex education. Between that and then don't bring no baby in here was a lot that I didn't know about consent and boundaries and healthy relationships, and like I can just have sex to please myself, or there is masturbation, just things that I didn't learn intentionally, I would say, or there wasn't a space to intentionally have that. So that's what drew me into sexual health, and that's what drew me into sex education in particular, because I'm like, as a mental health provider in our community, sometimes it's hard to talk about mental health in general.
Right.
Sexual health is, I ain't gonna lie, it's a little bit elitist. A lot of people with the sexual health specialization, they're gonna charge a pretty penny.
Oh,
And
yes.
I was thinking about my community. Now, when we go to a girls' night, we'll go to the barbershop, we'll go to a sorority meeting,
Yeah.
meeting. So I'm thinking, okay, the therapy part, I got that. So the education for me was like, let me just meet the people where they are, because like if I talk to you, we're gonna talk about sex in some kind of way. So
Right.
that's why I feel like the conversation is needed, because we just need to own it for us, whether we're having sex or not having sex, but just ourselves as sexual beings, and sometimes it's not necessarily about like an act or a function, we're talking
Right.
about like my group chats, we're talking about perimenopause. We're talking about, I have some friends, like I'm in that age range where like some people are grandparents, some people trying to have their first baby. So it's a whole lot, going on. And so the conversation is important because it's a part of our life, like our mental health, job,
Yeah.
kids.
Right.
It's important.
And then the sex piece, like how you worded it so well, like it goes hand in hand, because it can also impact your mental health. Like if you go into things and you don't know, or like the shame associated with things, or just feeling very naive. Why do you think that, like, for parents, Black parents, that there can be sometimes like a disconnect in having that conversation with their children? Do you think it's for like lack of time, lack of education for themselves, or like a fear type of thing?
I think it's mostly fear. I think it's fear, and I think it's fear and stigma, in the sense of, if we talk about it, then some kind of way I'm communicating uh permission. I get a lot of those conversations. Like, we talk about sex as like, something for pleasure, or we talk about something as part of a healthy relationship or lack thereof a relationship. But I feel like sometimes the conversation is, well, I don't want to give my permission. And then I also think sometimes people don't know what to say. I have a client who I've worked with a long time, and we've been together for a minute, but over time, those long-term clients, like nothing is off the table. And
Yes.
her daughter is a preteen, and we were talking about, well, first it was her daughter starting her cycle, and so we talked about that, and she felt prepared, like she was prepared for that. But then we kind of delved into liking boys, and maybe some uncomfortable conversations. And so it was really us having a conversation. It was not necessarily coaching or me educating the mom per se. We just had a safe space so she could be like, "Ooh, I was ready for the cycle. I was not ready for this part." And I think we just need a space to be like, that's okay.
Right.
Like, it's okay if you're a parent and you don't know what to say. Like, but how many parents say that? Like, a lot of us didn't grow up in that kind of situation, so just to be able to have that self-awareness of like, ooh, I don't know what to say. So I feel like that's a big part of it. And then I also feel like, on the other end of not knowing what to say, people feel like they have to say everything. Like, it's a one conversation and we talk, and, it's, you go off and be free. And it's like, just like with homework, like we talk about these sight words every day,
Yeah.
the flashcards every day. So I feel like, we just kind of roll back some of that pressure. It's like, no, we don't have to say everything at once. But I think there's sort of this happy medium of giving developmentally age appropriate information before it's needed. So I feel like sometimes, in our community, you don't necessarily hear about another person's miscarriage unless you had one. And then, somebody, your auntie is like, baby, I had three. Like, it's
I
we
know, until it's come up. Right.
I got fibroids, like, that's not a brunch conversation, but you kind of get initiated when you have certain life experiences. And I think some, especially with like sexual health, some of that we could do a better job as a community of just proactively talking about things. For instance, like with little children, just naming body parts, a penis, a vulva,
Right.
it's language, and that also helps them, to be able to talk to you. Because it's one thing, Black parents, you can tell mommy anything, you can always tell me or whatever, but sometimes people don't have the language. So, if someone, tells a kid to keep something private, and you talking about their little pocketbook or their wee
I
wee,
know. Then yeah. What are
and some people just kind of feel like, hey, like penis is a strong word, and I'm like, eyes, nose, penis.
right?
I think if we don't over sexualize sex,
Yes.
it feels more like a part of everyday life, just like everything else.
Yeah, because it's natural. I mean, it's how we got here.
That's literally how we got. That's, I'm like, yeah, no, that's the penis. But it's like it can start that early, because I know sometimes people ask me like, well, like how young, should I have the talk? And it's like, well, what talk or what aspect are you talking about? But I think toddlers, like that's sexual health, that's giving them language. Then you
Yeah.
get touch, bad touch when they get a little bit older, but in the context of like, only mommy, for bath time, mommy and daddy, or, your parents or the doctor or something like that. So I think it's, we can kind of think of it as iterative, just like everything else. We potty train, then we teach them how to tie their shoes and ride a bike. Same thing, it's gradual, and it doesn't have to be one thing, everything all at once.
Right. I love that. That's true. And speaking of the perinatal piece of it all, and then the fact that you do host workshops, which I feel like is so needed. And in one of the workshops I saw, or the services that you guys offer, is there's people who deal with mismatched desire and desire discrepancy, which can happen just in general in a relationship, but for sure after having a baby.
Oh,
How do you work with parents when there is that discrepancy, and how do you help them name it? Because I think sometimes people don't even know what to call it or what it is, or they just may, like after you have a baby, sometimes like your self-esteem isn't where you want it to be, your self-image. You may just be exhausted and tired, and that's just not at the forefront of your mind, versus their partner may have been waiting for a year or more for this opportunity, and then there creates this divide amongst the couple of already like the stress of adjusting to parenthood. So how do you support those that may be dealing with that?
In general, my support is really tied to what the person is experiencing in their relationship, because sometimes the discrepancy is that, it may be the birthing person who is like, I'm ready to go, and my partner is like, whoa, are you okay?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes it's not the birthing person is exhausted. Sometimes that birthing person ready to go, and the partner is like, "Hey, I'm overwhelmed. We don't need another baby right now." Like, so sometimes I'm at a place in my career where it's. I get a lot of different things, but I think whether it's in the postpartum period or not, but particularly in the postpartum period, just kind of doing an inventory of what the needs are, because a lot of times the sexual piece is much more of a connection and not necessarily physical intimacy or intercourse. So sometimes it's just that we're recalibrating our relationship, particularly for like first time parents. But even if you go from, 1 to 2, 2 to 3, it's, sometimes it's like, how are we as a couple? Like, how do we reconnect? And sometimes it is sexual intercourse or, sexual acts, but a lot of the times I see a lot of just intimacy. Like, I'm craving some kind of connection with my partner. And I think, talking about that, particularly in the context of like, you know, accelerators and like things that either, help you get in the mood, or things that kind of kill the mood for you. And
Yeah.
so sometimes, a lot of it is just reframing. It may look different. Maybe you used to like light candles and buy flowers, but now it's like, it's really sexy when you clean the kitchen, like when you wash the bottles and when you put that draft on those clothes, and you
Take that trash out.
Yeah. Get some tonight. So it's like having conversations of like, hey, here are some things that, because we're in this postpartum period, in any time, like it's always good to kind of just do an inventory, like particularly if you've been in a relationship for a while, because I think we get to a point, even in our friendships, I've known my best friend since we were 12. So it's like, I know her. And we had a girls' night a few months ago, and we were talking about just different things that we like now. Like she was like, pizza is her favorite food, and she was like, you still like Dr. Pepper? And I'm like, oh, Dr. Pepper was college. Like I've been a Pepsi girl for at least like a decade, but it's one of those things where it's like you feel like you know someone, so you make assumptions that may have been correct at a point in time, but things have changed. And so I think it's really important, particularly in the postpartum period, of like, I know that we haven't connected, and now that, it's safe for us to reconnect, or it seems like we both want to, but there's something like we're not able to connect. And so I think having that conversation is important. But a lot of times in my therapy, I might just be seeing one partner. Sometimes I see both partners, and sometimes I'm only seeing one. So just helping them to be able to go and have a conversation with their partner of like, hey, this is what I need. And a lot of it, again, for Black women in particular, is like owning that. Like, what is it that you need? Like, say it, because I also feel like sometimes in the postpartum period, it's so overwhelming. Me having to tell you what I need feels like I be your mama too. Like now I got to be your mama too. I got to take care of the kids. I'm breastfeeding. And, if I have to tell you all this stuff, like you should know. And giving grace, that's something that's been big in my sessions as of late. Grace for yourself and grace for your partner, because people don't know. Most places at our jobs, we communicate with our children. We communicate, a lot of places we communicate, and in our relationship, because it's our safe space, sometimes it's like they should know. Mm-hmm. And then also becomes the catch-22 of like, because they do know maybe what the information they have is not most accurate right now. So just kind of have courageous conversations, as one of my good friends says, about, and we got to talk about it so we can change it.
Yes. Now on the reverse, because as you were talking about that, it made me think of, for those who are trying to conceive. Mm-hmm. I know, like in working with clients who are trying to conceive, it can come very much so like a science project, with all of the poking and the scheduling and, is it this date and the ovulation and this is the week, this is the day we need to do, da 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 da. And then the up and down of the roller coaster of, did I get my cycle or did I not get my cycle? And it can take the desire or continuity, I will say.
Yep.
And it can feel very just scheduled and rehearsed.
Sure.
Yeah. So how would you recommend it to still be fun while you also still have like this goal in the background going on?
So I feel like schedule is not a bad thing. But I think that particularly if a couple is trying to conceive, the scheduling becomes part of the work of attempting to conceive. But I think you can also schedule fun. I'm a Capricorn. I'm very type A. I plan my free time. So I believe in scheduling. But to that end, I mean, you can just plan a non-contraceptive free night. You can plan, hey, this is not we trying to get pregnant. We trying to do something real nasty, something we haven't done. Maybe we go get a room, not at the house, like maybe we do a little role play, like, like maybe, and, a good activity is like, hey, let's talk about our fantasies. Like maybe we can write them down. Like I think sometimes earlier in a relationship, people might be more inclined to do that. But when you get to that stable part, when you get to that part of a relationship where you're coexisting together, especially if you got a well-oiled machine, things become very practical, even right. And so I think that there is an opportunity to say, hey, like Let's switch it up. And I think, any small change can switch it up. It could be lingerie. It could be, hey, we're getting a sitter. We're going to go somewhere different. We're going to do it different. We might try a different type of sex this time. Like maybe you're not having, contraception. You're not having sex to conceive. Maybe you try a different orifice. Maybe you try different temperatures.
Mm-hmm.
Have like a little kink box, and take a trip with your partner to the sex shop. I love like a nice little trip, and see what they got. Maybe you try handcuffs. But there is a wonderful world. I think the strength in a relationship of a couple that is trying to conceive is that at least to a small degree there is a consensus.
Mm-hmm.
Desire. So I think that that's something people can build upon. And if you have to schedule it, so be it. But I think just kind of having that, look, we're going to just have some time that's not for that. And I think that's also important to remember too.
That is good. I love it. I love it. How, in your opinion, because I know sometimes when we think about sex education, sex wellness, it's a lot. And perhaps this could be very anecdotal, but Black women having these conversations. Do you find that Black men enter the chat? Are Black men, trying to learn about sexual health and desires and libido and all of that stuff? Does that ever come up?
Yes. I would say so. My professional experience is kind of like in these boxes. So I specialize in maternal mental health and sexual health education, but full-time I work in professional sports, more so with a focus on mental health. And we know sexual health is part of that. So I'm not having explicit conversations with people about their sexual health like I am in my private practice. However, I think with men, in my private practice, it comes up more so in terms of identity, actually. Whereas women, we talk about maybe it's trauma, maybe it's libido, and it might be a way we enter that conversation. But with guys, a lot of the guys that I've had, we've talked about actually their desire or lack thereof and how it's affecting their self-image and masculinity. I feel like sometimes guys need a safe space, not just people who've experienced like child sexual abuse, but just in general. Like if I am a man and, I'm not trying to have sex all the time, what does that mean? I think it's particularly for people like in their 30s. I don't know if this is a scientific fact, but but in my own personal research, it seems that the 30s are an interesting time where, some people in my circles from my research, it seems that, in the 30s is kind of flip-flop where like a lot of women that I know are like, all day, I'm ready to have sex all the time. And the men are kind of like pulling back, wanting more meaningful sex, wanting more meaningful connection. And so I feel like that's a difference from like the got people in their 20s. And so that's what I've been seeing in my private practice. But I will say from a sports perspective and then just in general, a lot of mental health, the nexus. So when I worked in child welfare, we always used to talk about the nexus. So it was that maybe, a parent was unhoused and maybe they had mental health issues, but those were not the reasons that children or child welfare system had to get involved. So we would say, the nexus between your mental health issues and the homelessness is that, the children didn't have food or, there was lack of supervision. And so I feel like, the nexus with men's mental health and their sexual health is that a lot of the times you see function because you see diabetes and hypertension, and with men, it's a direct correlation with, their penile functioning.
Yeah.
Infections and things like that. And so I feel like in both of those spaces, I get a lot from partners of like, hey, it's not working right. And like a lot of it because like, heart health in particular, and, our community is overwhelmingly affected with heart health issues. But, because of the heart health issues, then there is, sexual functioning issues. And then with the sexual functioning issues, a lot of, again, about my manhood, all of those things. And you talk about professional athletes, and I work with former players, so people who are transitioning, and that whole identity piece, because a lot of guys might go through periods of depression, and when they're depressed, they're not feeling like being sexual people or like having intercourse. And I also want to, continue to underscore like that sexual piece is connection, period. Maybe not even necessarily, intercourse, but like I'm having difficulty connecting because there's anhedonia. Like I'm not connected in life. I'm not joy in life. Therefore, it's hard for me to be in this partnership and please you, let alone myself. So as men do enter the chat, I want to have more conversations with men, particularly with Black men, specifically around issues like child sexual abuse, because I have worked with a lot of men, women too, but I think with women, when we think about child sexual abuse, I know, for a long time, my mind will automatically default to girls being assaulted, or, that sort of thing. Right. But our community, when Black boys are assaulted, specifically by older Black women, thing, we don't talk about it. And it becomes part of their self-talk and part of their identity. And sometimes they don't even have the words to understand that it's trauma. I remember a few years ago, one of my cohorts from the Michigan program, she's now Dr. Jessica Ross, but we did like an IG live because little Boosie had about his kid. He paid,
I remember that.
Yeah. Like this is not okay, There are so many people who could relate, or that's how they, that was their sexual debut, or and sometimes again people don't know that, like, well, this was like an abuse of power, like you were actually assaulted, like this is not healthy or normal, it wasn't okay. And I think just giving boys that space, the same way we do our girls, them know, because it does become a part of their experience as sexual beings. And so you may find a lot of the guys who, that's something that I want to do more with, because I give men language and safe spaces, whether it's about that or just, hey, kink, or if it's about, non-monogamy, whatever it is. I definitely want to do more with men specifically, and Black, because we got a lot we need to talk about.
Because like to your point about Lil Boosie and like others who introduce sex in that way, you have this distorted idea of how sex is, or like what it needs to look like, or the dynamics of it. Similar to like some people who may have only been exposed to sex via porn, and think like, okay, this is how it's supposed to look, this is how it's supposed to feel, and they'll think that. Or even earlier in our conversation, we were talking about some women who may feel as if sex is only for the pleasure of the partner and not for themselves. They're just kind of like this object that's just here for this, versus like, you get to, this you, not you, what you want.
Look, the clitoris is the only body part that's sole purpose is pleasure. So I'm like, now I don't know nobody else's spiritual belief, but I'm like, my God, if he created the heavens and the earth and that clitoris, I think he intended for me to have some pleasure. So
and there's no shame in that.
None whatsoever, but it's so in the layers, because like church hurt, like I think there is so much in our community, and don't get me wrong, there is a sacred space of like Pandora's box of like, hey, oh, you didn't know about that either. Like, don't get me wrong, I've definitely had some pockets of conversation where I'm like, oh wow, what is that? So I think that, there is a whole spectrum, but in my experience, I remember I had a client who she was married 6 years and was having painful sex, like so much so that she had tearing and bleeding every time. And so, when she came in and she was like, I love my husband, he's feeling rejected, I'm feeling ashamed. And so I'm talking to her like, well, like what's his response? Like when you let him know that like this is very painful, it's uncomfortable. And she was like, he doesn't know. And so I said, and y'all have sex like regularly? And she was like, not as frequently as he would want, but yeah, we do. So I'm like, wow, you've been married 6 years, 6 years of painful sex, like tearing and bleeding every time. And so, our first, like the first thing that I worked with her was on you don't have to do that. Because and keep in mind her husband was like her first partner, like, did everything right by the book, met him, was loving God, got married. So one, she didn't have a lot of sexual experience, which is no problem, but I think the information about her own body and just the education, because the expectation is that as a wife, your body belongs to your husband, you keep your man pleased. And so we just had a conversation of like, well, before we can even get to you letting him know that like this is painful, like you got to reclaim your body for yourself. Like your body is yours first, and then you share that with your husband. So we talked about like what feels good, what doesn't feel good. And so we started there, and eventually she was able to share with him. And eventually I gave her language like, hey, this is like a whole medical condition. And, sometimes I go back and forth because I hate to pathologize a human experience. I feel like so much about mental health, that DSM-5 TR is pathologized.
Yeah.
Grief, like, well, how long do you grieve? Because I know my ass grieve. Like, I'm grieving a lot of old stuff.
Yeah.
So, there is a cultural sensitivity fine line, but at the same time I wanted to give her language to help her understand that the shame you are carrying is not yours. Like there's a whole medical situation here, and because it's a medical situation, there are options. So I connected her with a pelvic floor physical therapist, and so she was able to do some exercises, just learn more about her body, because all I learned was you do your Kegels, keep it tight, keep it right. And it's just like sometimes keeping it too tight is a bad thing, like stuff like that. So, eventually, I think when we got to a place where she was flying on her own, I remember one time she called me like, hey, she called me, and her husband's, I'm getting into a great place, but basically something very pivotal happened, and I told her, I said, I might have would have folded. Like with the circumstances, I might have went ahead and gave him some. But she, like, girl, tell him no. And I felt so good. You go, girl. And gonna call me because but she was like reclaiming her body, like reclaiming her time. And she was just like, I just wasn't at a place where I was relaxed. And I'm like, this is why I do this shit. Like this is how I do it. Like, good for you, So yeah. But we need that language, because like I didn't know. I'm a person who I got diagnosed with PCOS in my early 20s, and I remember I had like a young doctor who didn't look like me, and he was like, you may want to have kids by the time you're 30, because if not, you probably won't ever have kids. And as a provider, I'm always trying to balance information and what's accurate, and being real and honest, but also offering hope and not selling a dream. So it's a dance you do, but there's a way to say PCOS is the leading cause of infertility. And so here's some more information. But there are a lot of people who are diagnosed with PCOS who have children. And my job was 22, so I wasn't trying to go out, but if, the thought of being a woman and maybe not being able to conceive completely overwhelmed me. So I always try to balance giving information and psychoeducation with like, if there's hope, or if there's a resource somewhere, and it may not be, because again, that's why I went into the sexual education part, because therapy is not where everybody's healing is. Right. As a Black woman, I strongly believe that. I'm always telling my people, like, look, you can call Jesus, Tyrone, me, like, don't put it all on me, baby, because like I get one person, and I love the rapport that I have with my clients, because like, we all locked in, but at the same time it's like, hey, just like, you got a doctor, you have a dentist, like I'm one part of a larger puzzle. And I think just giving us those options, because I know for me personally, like I was in my sexual health program and I really understood what a pelvic floor physical therapist
When
does.
also sex education didn't teach us anything. I didn't learn about pelvic health. I didn't learn about a pelvis, what a pelvic floor does until after I had a child.
That part, and I think about stuff like that, like, wow, there's so many times in my life where I'm like, I really could have benefited from talking to them. Recent, like a few years ago, my primary care was managing, a lot of my issues related to PCOS, and I'm like, well, I'm followed by dermatology, and I'm like, I used to be followed by like reproductive endocrinology. Like if I haven't seen an endocrinologist in a long time, I referred myself, and I found a nice Black woman, and we locked in. But I'm saying, like stuff like that, where unfortunately in our community we might not get all the information that. And so, that's why it's important to like have conversations. And I was just Googling, because I'm like, I remember at one point in time I used to. So, it may be that like just explore and ask questions, because there is information out there, and our suffering doesn't have to be silent, and we don't have to suffer. Like we don't have to suffer first to get pain or to get joy, like to arrive at pleasure. And I think that's what like relationships, anything, like we don't have to suffer to achieve pleasure. Like, pleasure is our birthright. So that's why I'm like, no, however we can get it.
Right. Put that on the shirt. Pleasure is our birthright. Yeah.
I think somebody else might have it on there, but I'll double check, because now I believe in it. Like you have to, because if not, I mean, I think about my own experiences, and it was, again, so much more I needed to hear in addition to not bringing a baby home, because I'm about to be 40 and I have never brought a baby home. So I'm like, I did that. I'm a listener. I'm like, I did that. But there's some stuff I didn't bring home at all. But it came to me, and I was not prepared to deal with it, to address it. Like I didn't have words. I didn't know what to say. And my mom has always been my safe place. And she my little friend now. I grew up like she wasn't my little friend, but now we key, but it's like I knew I could, but I some things I didn't feel comfortable talking to her about. And so that was part of, another reason why I'm like, we just need to create safe spaces, because a safe space doesn't guarantee that it will be a space people utilize. Just like, with CPR, you do CPR, you hope to save a life. You might not catch everybody, but at least you're prepared and you can offer that assistance, like that first aid. But so much, again, like I said, like about my own body, about function. My mom also, I'm blessed her. I love my mom. But like another thing I remember, I wasn't allowed to use tampons as a teenager. That was like a whole, tampons are for people who are sexually active. And mind you, like I had PCOS, so I've always had a heavy flow. So stuff like that, like sexual health is much broader than just intercourse stuff. It was things like that where, I remember like getting my first box of tampons, like playing around in the bathroom, like, like, because I didn't have anyone to show me or teach me, and I really was sneaking around to buy them. Like you would have thought I might have had a kilo, but I was like, it's stuff like that. So like, just kind of having conversations, because like even that for me, like then I'm, at school, I'm a heavy bleeder, I'm already paranoid, so all the things. And, you talk about like mental health, like I was just overwhelmed, because I was like a straight A student and stuff like that. And I know even for myself, and I'm an open book. So like for me, because, this is pre-text messages. So I remember my mom had found a note that my cousin and I, we used to, letters. And so that's how my mom found out that I was sexually active. She was like, well, you have an appointment coming up. You can figure out what kind of birth control you want to be on. And that's that. And so I switched from the depot shot to birth control pills in college. And just kind of going through this drought. And I didn't get my doctor didn't talk about it like this. You might experience this, and I never I remember my partner at that time was just like, hey, you ain't, you're not feeling me anymore. And I was like, yes, I am, yes, I am. But it's like just having that language of like, hey, something that you may experience. Cause I'm like, well, I'm thinking it, I'm feeling the same, but my body's not working the same. So I think just kind of giving us, again, like language is so important. And just kind of explaining things that may happen or things that come up within situations that we kind of can anticipate, like a birth control switch. Somebody somewhere should have told me you might experience this. The same with perimenopause. Like I feel like so often I'm having these conversations about perimenopause, and I recently did a talk over the summer with the Raiders. They had a wellness event for their former players, and so for their significant others, I did a workshop on perimenopause. And some people think like, some people talk about like menopause as like a phase of life, and it is, but menopause is just 12 months of no cycle. Really, perimenopause is mostly what people are talking about, that period where your cycles are ceasing, or they're slowing down, but you got your brain fog and all happening within your body, libido. There are so many reasons that your libido may change. I'm always kind of talking to people when they're like, sometimes it's not just about if you want to have sex or not. Like sometimes a change in libido is libidos are very sensitive to whatever is going on in our life. So I feel like I'm all over the place, but I'm just saying part of what made me get into this is my own life experience as a Black woman, my own health experiences, and also just being a mental health professional. Because like I can give you a depression scale, but I also know how I answer them as a clinician. So I'm like, I mean, you might not catch everything, but if I ask you about your relationships, if I ask you about your body, if I ask you about pleasure, I think some people's minds default to sexual pleasure. But like, I ask people like, what brings you joy? Like I often don't use the word pleasure because I think people's minds go, they go to sexual health. Yeah. But I find as a mental health provider is if I ask you what brings you joy, like what do you do to release? Like what do you do to just, calm your nervous system? And sometimes people are like,
I know, they have to think about it.
Yeah. And like, hey, like what do I do? And so I'm like, the nexus with that is if you cannot connect to joy, a lot of times people are not connected to their bodies. And if you are connected to your body, there's usually a disconnect, because there's also a thing too, like maybe you having a lot of sex, but maybe you're not fulfilled in that sex. Yeah. So, kind of having that conversation of like what brings you joy, particularly with moms and people who are postpartum, like what makes you feel good? And like, I not a title, not, when my kids are good, or when that's great. I let them say that, sometimes you got to get it off, but it's like, no, Keisha, what do you do for you? Right. You feel whole. What makes you feel like a woman? What makes you just feel light and free? And a lot of times that's what we started, because sometimes people cannot name it. Sometimes people are like, I don't know. Like before I became a mom, or, before, I had my special needs kid, or, like by the time I go to work and, I teach and, I'm cooking and all that and making sure my husband is straight, like.
It just becomes about task.
Yeah.
They kind of themselves.
Like, for me, centering joy is like centering pleasure, is centering joy, and then we can connect to the sexual part.
Yes. Yes. And how you said it breaks it down in such a digestible way, for people to really like find that to be tangible and sit with that and think it through and how to implement that in their day to day. My last thing before we go into rapid fire questions.
Okay.
You are in Durham, right?
Yep, in Durham, North Carolina.
Okay. Do you have any upcoming workshops, any events, anything people need to know about, or if they are in the area, how they can get in contact with you?
Oh, that's so great. I wish I did. So I'm working on a few things for next year, because let me put this out there, because I'm manifesting. I need people afraid to stand in agreement, but I have had this vision to do a pleasure brunch. I want to do it in Durham. And so I want it to be like, I used to owning personal pleasure. So basically, I just want Black women, all people, Black women though. I want us to come have a space where, we talk about pain, pleasure, perimenopause, but just kind of like a high level overview. Me and some of my girls from my sexual health certificate program. I used to have a podcast with two of my friends, Dr. Erica Simpson, she's an OBGYN in California, and then Dr. Jennifer Scott, she's in Dallas, and she is a public health professional. And so but we were doing the podcast as a hobby. And so, when you ain't doing a podcast to make money, but we sort of that, but this pleasure brunch. And so I want you to walk in through a vulva, like,
oh, I love that.
I have a working sheet, so I need to get sponsorships. My goal is to have this in May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month, as well as Masturbation Month. So I'm manifesting this pleasure brunch in Durham with some of my friends, a conversation where we can just kind of be free. I want coochie cookies. Like I this is what I think about when I'm meditating. And so I see it. So I just need a funder and a sponsor. I'll have lube, I'll have condoms, maybe little goodie bags, and just kind of want to have a place where we start a conversation. Maybe it's ongoing, but that's what I want to manifest. But in terms of the schedule, nothing concrete right now. I am working on a women's night, a pain and sip, and it'll be special pain and sip. So I am working with a local artist to create my vision, because I want a nice, healthy vulva. And so my brain has been cooking up some stuff. So it's all in the slow cooker. So I would say follow my business page, which is Vitality Wellness Solutions. And hopefully a website revamp will be coming up, but stay tuned because I'll post on both pages. But yes, May, put it on your prayer list, Matthew 18 and 20, stand in agreement. And so basically that's my hope. I just want to have this community where we can just start having these conversations. And so that
I can't wait to attend. That sounds amazing.
Okay. Yeah. I even saw like a penis waffle maker. So I don't know. That's what I'm just saying. All the things. We manifested.
Yeah, that happened. Okay, you ready for your rapid fire?
Yes.
Lil' Kim or Nicki Minaj?
Oh, look, Kim. I don't like her. Barbs don't come get me, but I like her music. I was never the barbs. I was never a huge barbs, but no, I don't like a mean girl.
Yes. And like speaking of like sexual freedom, Lil' Kim was like back like
Yeah. I mean, it could have been. You could have did Trina. I would have chose Trina over both of them. I was there.
Nah.
Yeah.
Yes. Trina. Okay. No Limit or Cash Money?
No, because they just had a verses and I watched it late, but I was like, I'm from the Gulf Coast, so I got to show love to both of them.
Okay, that's reasonable. All right. So a cruise ship with your family, like a family reunion, cousins, uncles, all the people, parents, everybody, or a private yacht with your boo thing?
I'm gonna say the family trip. I like my family a lot. When my boo come, I'm gonna say the family trip. I'm gonna say family trip because I'm literally planning a family trip right now, so my mind is in family trip mode. But I mean, the boo thing, a yacht with a whole yacht. I want my cake and eat it too, so I'm gonna say both. But if I have to pick, I'm gonna say the family trip for now.
Okay. Karaoke or bowling?
Karaoke. Oh, I love play me a song, Betty Wright. My family, we do karaoke all the time. So yeah,
I love karaoke. So
love karaoke. I love music, so
Me too.
I usually bust out in the song.
Me too. Same. Okay, last question. Thanksgiving or Christmas?
These are good questions because I'm a holiday person. Like, I'm a holiday person. So I'm going to say Christmas over Thanksgiving, but it's like, it's just an inch separating them. I love them both. Like, when we log off, I'm about to start cooking.
Why Christmas an inch more over Thanksgiving?
I just think the season, because like Thanksgiving is a day that falls during Christmas, the Christmas time of year.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's the whole season for me. It's like people are just happier. Even if they're not happy, they fake it more, like I feel, it's just a time of year where it's like, oh, like I'll give $1 to the Salvation Army today. I'll donate some canned goods. Like, I'm donating clothes now. It's just like it's just a time where I think for me, I feel like I'm always thinking about other people, but I feel like in general, like society, we're thinking about others and, like how we can be more helpful. So that's probably why.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
That was questions. Oh, you might be too.
I mean, it's what we do for a living. Talk to people.
We do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah. But I will leave all of your info in the feeds as this gets posted on all the socials so everybody can follow you and we can register for this brunch happening in May.
Yes, in an agreement. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But thank you. Happy holidays. Happy
Thank you.
I will talk.
I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye.